Hello, and I'm back with Rich from Early Morning Barking. And Rich and I thought it might be quite fun to have a bit of a conversation about love bombing. So, in the last month in the UK, the Crown Prosecution Service have issued new guidance about love bombing as a form of domestic abuse, recognised as a criminal activity that you can be prosecuted for. And what they're advising is that people look for love bombing within relationships that are characterised by coercive control. And coercive control is a serious and terrifying form of psychological abuse and torture, where one partner controls the behaviours of the other person. And it takes the form of things like financial abuse, not allowing your partner to see other people, to have other relationships, maybe even to seek outside help or medical care. It may involve controlling their finances, spying on them, using listening devices or trackers on phones or people's cars without their permission to see where they're going, listening into their conversations that should be private. So it's a really frightening form of abuse, and it's a very serious form of abuse, particularly because while it may not be physical in the moment, it is associated with an escalating pattern that can lead towards homicide when the victim decides to end the relationship. So that's what the Crown Prosecution Service are seeing as love bombing. But I think a lot of people use the term love bombing to mean other things. And I thought it might be interesting to have a chat with Rich, who's got diagnosis of borderline personality and narcissistic personality disorders, about his experience of what's often called love bombing within the kind of cluster B community. So over to you. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not all that other stuff. That's all. Yeah, that, as you say, it's very criminal. It's very dark and controlling and abusive and all of that. And I think when you sort of mention love bombing in the context of all of those other things, it seems like, I don't know, but there's all these other big things going on. Why did you add love bombing into that? It's all bad. It's all abusive and coercive and horrible. And I don't, and I can't relate to the mindset behind doing that. It's not something that I've ever done or wanted to do. Or the trouble is, I think with the love bombing in the cluster B sense, there is a lot of premeditation assigned to it that simply isn't there. There is a lot of planning and you know, like we have a goal. And the truth is, we really don't. But if we don't, then it means that we're not the evil people that certain channels and whatever would like people to think that we are. And so it doesn't fit. It doesn't mesh well together. But it's not something I'm aware that I've ever done. And I'm kind of, it's becoming just a buzzword that is meaningless now. And
Yeah.
that's not a good thing.
The Crown Prosecution Service gave some examples of love bombing and
Okay.
behaviours. And so they talked about a partner who was doing something that looked loving or caring or buying their partner an expensive gift with the aim of avoiding abusive behavior being detected. So it's basically doing it in order to look good to other people, to avoid being detected as an abuser and to avoid potential prosecution. And they also talked about doing it as a means to reward the victim for good behavior. So it's a very calculated form of psychological abuse.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how helpful it is to bring psychiatric diagnosis into that. That's a criminal act. And as far as I'm concerned, that is for the criminal justice system. It is not for the mental health system to deal with. And, you know, what I would also say very clearly to people who, if you recognize that in your relationship, the place to go are some of the services that have expertise in domestic abuse. So in the UK, Women's Aid are particularly good at supporting people with this, and the police, because it is criminal. It is a terrifying form of abuse. But my concern is that we use the same language of love bombing to refer to something that I think is common in all relationships, which is at the beginning, you're all excited and you are a little idealistic about yourself and the other person in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and you see everything through rose tinted glasses, and you have, what psychologists would call positive illusions, which is, basically thinking you and this other person are probably a little bit better than you actually are. And that's associated with better relationship satisfaction. It's associated with a longer relationship. It's not a bad thing. And, kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's that is the start of it. Who turns up to a date without bringing their A game? You're turning up to try and be your best and impress this person, get this person to like you, and that's we all do that. Surely, I don't think that's just me or
No.
narcissists or whatever. That's what we all do. And I'm of the belief that every dating process, you're optimistic until there's a reason to just call it off. Like, it's all going well until you do that. No, sorry, then we're done. And so everything is great until that happens.
Do you think that's a more narcissistic thing or a more borderline thing, or both?
I think it's a more borderline thing. I really do. That's definitely how I experienced it. It's more kind of you are wanting to be loved, and you suddenly, here's a person who might love me, and you have this image in your mind of what that means to you when you're in the relationship that you want to have, and you take that and you put it on this person, and you go, I found it, there they are. And it doesn't matter who that person is or what they like or anything like that. And you just carry on with that. No, you're the perfect person I found, kind of thing. And of course,
so it's quite idealizing at that point.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I always experienced it. I tended to idealize.
Yeah.
And you sort of felt, and getting that feeling of, once you're in a relationship, then what I didn't learn at a young age, there's a difference between a relationship that's just started and one that has been going on for a little while, and the way you relate to each other and how that functions and that sort of thing. And what I used to do was kind of expect that all of that comfort and intimacy, all the regularity of a long running relationship would happen immediately. And I could be in that headspace immediately, but that is weird and frightening to anyone who doesn't have BPD or who isn't going through it themselves. It's very intense. It's very confusing and that sort of thing. And
it's that desire for closeness and someone who's going to be there, someone who's not going to abandon you, someone who's going to take good care of you.
Yeah. All that fairly dependent kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So this person will fix me, this person will help me, this person will make me the person I want to be. And I think certainly when you're younger, you don't realize those are all bad reasons to be in a relationship with somebody. And you're out there actively looking for them and trying to find them and wondering why things keep going wrong for you.
And I guess the problem is that appeals to some of the more narcissistic type personalities, because it's like, I can be put on a pedestal. I can be the perfect lover, the perfect partner. I can have a soulmate. This can be a really special relationship, and it plays into the fantasy of ideal love.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the narcissistic partner. And then at some point, you realize the other person isn't perfect. And that can produce, well, you can say, what does it produce for the more borderline person in that relationship?
That's when you just split on somebody. I guess there's all kinds of ways it can go, because it can kind of creep in, because it is somewhat delusional. It's not true, and you're ignoring things, right? You're ignoring as best you can all of those many indications that they are not this idealized person that you have built them up to be, because there are so many of those things. And it's like the banging on the door that just gets louder and louder and louder and louder until you just can't ignore it anymore. And so it brings this things just get harder and tougher and harder, and you get more miserable until eventually you snap and you split on somebody. And that's when they've gone from the ideal to horrific. What were you ever thinking? They're the worst person in the world, all that kind of thing. And it just all explodes.
It's similar, isn't it? Because I think both the borderline and the narcissistic person in those relationships, and I'm not saying everybody in a relationship with someone with borderline is narcissistic, and everyone who's narcissistic is in a relationship with a borderline, of course, but these flavors tend to be there,
Yeah.
even for people who wouldn't meet any kind of criteria for a diagnosis. But the more borderline person, my experience is they tend to go into this state of despair. I'm losing this person. I'm being abandoned. The anxiety goes through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an incredibly distressing and anxiety provoking process that can lead them either to be raging and really, really angry. And it's almost like, how could you do this to me? How could you leave me? This is a terrible way to treat me. I thought you loved me.
Mm.
And the more narcissistic person is like, well, you are not my ideal fantasy lover. This is not the soulmate relationship. This is not the spectacular, ideal vision of perfect romance that I dreamt of. So I could do better than you. And they tend to devalue and put down and avoid.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a nice mix of both, I think, in my life.
That's not unusual.
And you would sort of fall between the despair, because there's all of those feelings of inadequacies, and especially in the situation I felt I was in, where you're constantly being reminded you aren't good enough, you aren't doing enough of this, or you're doing that wrong, and you're doing too much of that. Everything is wrong. And once you reach that point where it's just battering you with everything that's wrong, you can't get out from under that. You're now just caught under this in despair, and you're just breaking down, and it's all just going to go wrong until the rage flares up in response to this being beaten down. That's where the narcissism takes over, in the it will protect me from my feelings of inadequacies and failings and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, you move between this whole, like, why aren't I good enough for you, to you're not good enough for me. Why am I wasting my time with you? And these two states cannot coexist, not rationally. And so, yeah, you end up just having to, this is how it just breaks down irreparably, I think. And you develop, it gets worse. So, like with the borderline side that becomes more defeated, the narcissist side becomes more snarky, has more bad comments to make about you, starts picking on you a lot more, and devalues you a lot more, and that sort of thing. Oh, you're not wearing that, are you? This kind of thing. And just despairing at them for not being, why aren't they better? Damn you, I'm stuck with you. And all of that stuff. So it's a horrible contrast of things to be stuck with, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I honestly think as you develop these toxic behaviors, it just begins to poison your relationship, and you aren't going to get better within it. And these things have to end for everybody's sake.
I think at the extreme ends, they really do. And you can see at its most toxic, what's going to happen there is the borderline person who's feeling really abandoned is going to start chasing the more narcissistic person. It's almost like a poking. Come and love me. Come and love me. Pay me attention. Don't do this to me. Come. Look after me. Look after me. Look after me. And the more narcissistic person gets more and more devaluing, dismissive, snarky, critical, rejecting. And then the more desperate the borderline person feels, and the more irritated the narcissistic person feels, and that's going to spiral. And when I work with couples, I'm not quite so black and white of this needs to end, but I would invite both of them to be thinking about the relationship in less black and white ways.
It is a very difficult thing. And I think in relationships, we tend to think about problems and how they affect us and we don't always, it's not as easy to think about the person that we're with and what they may be going through that is causing
Hmm.
that situation, which is, that was a very difficult thing for me. And the whole cluster B thing was that any problems I had were a result of that. And so
Hmm.
punishing me for having those problems was not going to help the cause, and I couldn't deal with the cause while being punished.
No, it
Um,
can.
and so it was actually kind of amazing how quickly it was easy to solve those problems when not under that pressure.
Yeah.
It really didn't take long at all, relatively speaking. And it can be frustrating, but it feels good to have fixed a lot of stuff.
It's certainly the case that for some people, getting out of that kind of dynamic in their relationship opens the possibility for developing a much better, much more sturdy relationship with themselves.
Mm,
And particularly if they're quite intentional about it, um, forming a better relationship with the next person. I don't know if you
yes.
could say more about that. How did you go from that kind of extreme idealization and then extreme rage and maybe devaluing to now having a much healthier relationship?
Right. There were a number of factors at play. Um and right, so when the relationship I had been in came to an end, I'd been in therapy for about maybe 4 or 5 months at that point. And that had also been instrumental in sort of bringing about the end of that. When you're trying to, there's only so many therapy sessions you can go and try and explain, here's all the reasons why I think I'm an abusive person as explained to me by my partner. And you sit and you explain this to a room of people and they all go, "Mm, we've got something upsetting to explain to you, Rich," uh, and so it kind of brings that about. So as this one thing was ending, I was on this rise of therapy and self-actualization and getting a different perspective on what I'd been going through in my life. And as I started to feel, I was going to say feel better about myself, but that wasn't it. I started by feeling less bad about myself, which is I mean that to mean a slightly different thing. I wasn't yet feeling more positive, but the burden on me was starting
Mm.
to release a bit. Um, and then from then on in, it was a case of, I decided I'm gonna get on with my life. I'm gonna fix me and work on me and come at this from a completely different angle. Because at that point I didn't need a relationship to support me, to give me my identity, to tell me who I was. I didn't need to be rich and someone. I could just be rich, and Rich is also with this person, but he's rich. And that has been just the key thing in moving forward more than anything else. I mean, I changed a lot of other things that I've touched on briefly, sort of changing relationship structure and that kind of thing. But the biggest thing was saying, I'm going to make this, I'm going to live for me, and then someone else can be part of that, but I don't want to need them. I want to want
Yeah.
them.
That sounds to me like what happened was that you went from almost having like a younger version of yourself. I need someone to love me. I need someone to show me who I am. I need someone to take care of me. And without them, I really don't feel okay to be myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to having a much more stable, grown up adult identity of I know who I am, or at least I know something of who I am. I may not know myself fully, but this is me. And as this person I am, which is imperfect
Mm.
and messy on occasion, I want to relate to another messy, grown up person.
Yeah. I think I came to the realization that I was kind of, for all the problems that I have, I was kind of always okay with me. I was much more forgiving of me. I knew I was always doing my best one way or another, whatever that turned out to be. And once you remove the factor of that best not being good enough for a particular individual and being able to say, right, this is me, I am what I am. You can choose to like me or not like me, whatever, but this is it. And once you start approaching relationships from that point of view, and it all just becomes so much easier and nicer, and even, dare I say, more fun, because you're not wanting, I don't need validating. I don't need everyone to like me. I don't need everybody to fall in love with me or whatever, because if they don't, someone else might, or someone else will, whatever. And
So that also sounds like if you were to lose your relationship, you have more confidence that you would be okay.
Yes, absolutely. This is another thing I was just talking about, actually. It's that difference between needing and wanting. I don't fear what would happen to me without my girlfriend. I know I'll be fine. I'll be sad. I don't want to lose her at all. I want her in my life. I love her very much, but I'm not dependent on that. It's a nice to have, not a need. And before, relationships were a need. They were, what will I do without you? And not meaning that in the romantic, like, gosh, I don't know. It's like, seriously, what am I going to do without you? That, I think the degree to which we can feel that is perhaps overlooked a little bit. It's like a serious, I might just have to kill myself like if I'm not with you, because I don't know what I'm going to have to do. That level of fear. And to not have that is wonderful, but an odd adjustment. It doesn't come with the same intensity and obsessiveness as it did before. And so you do go through that stage of, do I really love this person? Because every example of love I've had throughout my life has been that obsession that I must think about them all the time and want to be with them all the time because they're amazing. I don't have that. And it's like, well, is this wrong? It's like, no, this is what you should be going for, really.
What were the early stages of your current relationship, which I think you'd say is a healthy relationship? What were the early stages like? Was there that kind of butterflies in your stomach, excitement,
Yeah.
rose tinted glasses?
I wouldn't say the rose tinted glasses thing, but it was all very exciting. It was always fun. And yeah, absolutely. All of that stuff. When you're like, right from the stage of, oh my God, I can't believe she messaged back. Because it was, we met on a dating app, and I think some people might be able to relate. Sometimes you just swipe and you don't care. And on occasion you'll see one, you're like, oh, I really want her to message back. And she was one of those, like, I didn't think she'd message back. This is amazing kind of thing. And so, yeah, straight away, this is exciting. This is good. And when you start meeting up and you find out you actually do get on really well and that sort of thing, it's exciting. It's fun. It just never went on to that idealized thing. And I think I don't know if it would be wrong to overlook the poly element of this particular thing, though, because that definitely played a role. Was that I was not meeting someone with the intention of finding that one person who will fill every one of my needs all the time. I was out looking for somebody that I could develop a relationship with and have feelings for, but purposefully, without trying to find that big one person thing. And so it kind of kept me tempered down. Expectations were, not as serious.
I think Because I think, I'm open-minded, whatever relationship structure works for you, whether that's kind of a polyamorous or consensual non-monogamous relationship or a monogamous relationship. I think what you've really managed to do, what you're describing, is that you can be excited about someone. You can be really excited about someone, and it can be really fun, and you will be seeing all their good sides and they will be seeing all your good sides, but you keep your feet planted on the ground. You
Yeah.
aren't intoxicated by it in the way that I think happens with what we call love bombing, and that extreme version of it that happens for people with personality disorders, in that it's that seeking of the ideal other, that your identity being caught up in the other person and in the relationship. I think what you've managed to do, and Polly may well be an important part
Yeah.
of being able to do that for you.
That
But
was the thing that did keep my feet on the ground.
it's
That
yeah,
it just removed this idea that there was one perfect person that I was looking for.
yeah.
Just forget that. And once I forgot that, it just right, just easy now. You're just you. You know you're a nice person. You know you can be fun to spend time with. Let's just find somebody who likes spending time with you and doesn't expect you to buy them things or drive them around all over the place. So someone who even on the same, from their point of view, doesn't have the same pressure to like you as much. Just can go, oh, Rich, yeah, Rich is great to
It's like
spend
you had
Thursdays with. You know,
permission to be ordinary,
exactly.
and so did the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I've seen people with borderline try to do non-monogamous relationships disastrously.
oh, hell
And people
yeah.
with MPD. I've seen the disasters,
Hell yeah.
and I've seen the people for whom it really, really works. So I don't have a black and white view on it, but I think it might just be worth saying that for some it's too much jealousy and too much worry about.
I in no way recommend it. Right? That's not my stance on recommending it
But it works
whatsoever.
for you.
It works for me right now. That's it. But in terms of should I do it? No, you shouldn't. You should just calm the hell down. But I did it because of all those things, because it pokes so many BPD triggers. The jealousy, the fear of abandonment, the romantic upset, all of these things go so against it that I did it just to poke those things. And it turned out all right. It could have very easily gone very badly. And I did say to myself, right, I'm going to try this. And it could go wrong. And I could get hurt. And if that happens, I will stop trying it. Okay. And I'm still at the okay bit with it. And yeah, it just kept my feet planted on the ground. Now, as it happened, that relationship did progress beyond where I thought it was going to. And so there's whole other stories behind that become more complicated, not really related to my mental health. But, it does give you that grounding of things move on because you want them to, not because you are desperately afraid of what will happen if they don't.
Yeah. And not because you need them to. And both you, I think this is the key, both you and the other person, yes, you're positive about each other. Yes, you see the best in each other, but you are not deluded.
Exactly.
And you're not idealized, and you're not kind of intoxicated by this new relationship. And I think the best advice I was ever given about dating, actually by a supervisor,
all right,
many years ago, but was look for someone you think is a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because if it's 10 out of 10, you're probably caught up in some kind of fantasy. Nobody's that great. But a good solid 7 means they've got some serious good qualities that you're interested in. But you're not blind to their reality.
I think that's great advice. I really do.
I'm like, it is good advice.
Yeah. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's that great. And so if you think they are, that's the problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, looking back throughout my entire romantic life, that's what I did. I didn't date anyone who wasn't perfect to me. And yeah, that just, it leads to nothing but
Like,
problems and explosions and rage and despair and all of that crap, basically.
and it's true. And I think it's really important to understand that dynamic. And people often refer to love bombing as part of that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's very different from the love bombing that's now written into this kind of legal guidance about what it looks like, which is this very calculated, deliberate form of abuse. And I've worked with people who've been victims of that kind of abuse, and it's terrifying. Like, this other person, in a very calculated, deliberate way, was gathering information about them that they could then use to exploit. They knew what was important to them. They knew what buttons to press in order to get what they wanted out of them, which varies what that is. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's other things, but it's this, it's psychological torture. And
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
worried that we're kind of muddying the waters by calling everything love bombing.
I think we absolutely are. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I just think we absolutely are. All of that behavior, that coercive control, is so dark. And it doesn't speak to MPD at all. It doesn't, having that level of control over somebody, and that it isn't what the narcissism is about.
It's
MPD is that response to feeling better about myself. It's my shield against the reality of the world that says I'm not what I want to be or what I think I should be.
yeah.
And controlling another person has nothing to do with that whatsoever.
I think you see that kind of control in the more malignant forms of narcissism sometimes when and I think if you were thinking about kind of psychiatric diagnosis, you're probably tipping more into psychopathy
Mm-hmm.
and sadism in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
which is going into the depths of the forensic world.
Yeah.
Um, and it's serious. I mean, like I say, it's really, I cannot stress how frightening and terrifying a crime that is to be a victim of.
Oh,
But
absolutely. And
I
I'm
don't think we serve those victims well either by
no.
then referring to the kind of more narcissistic and borderline, the more run of the mill, non malignant versions, where is it messed up? Yes, it's messed up. Does it cause people a lot of hurt? Absolutely. At times it really, really does.
Mm.
But it's not this calculated, deliberate form of abuse. And if you understand what it is, you can actually start to take steps away from it. The person who's got NPD can deliberately, intentionally recognize when they're in that idealizing stage and begin to, I'll suggest to people, I want you to actively look for this person's ordinariness, their humanity, and yours, and deliberately show them the more ordinary aspects of your personality and see how they respond. You can start to experiment with that and you can go quite far. Same for the borderline. It's like, let's work on your sense of yourself so you feel a little bit more grounded and a little bit more secure in your identity. So, yes, I want this relationship and I really want to be close to someone, but if it ends, I'd be sad, I'd be potentially devastated, but I'd still be me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd still be me. I'd still be okay.
Yeah. I think what people struggle with it on the narcissistic side is that we forget about you so quickly. And all of this malignant stuff is just not, because we've already, the actual narcissist already doesn't care about you at that point. And I think this every time I scroll past here's another 6 ways to hurt the narcissist video. What it triggers in me is, how dare you think that I give a shit about what you're doing? I have already moved on. I am living rent free in your brain with you thinking up all these ways to hurt me, and I'm gone. I'm done. You are nothing now. And again, that doesn't fit with the whole but the whole malignancy, the coercive control, the hoovering, I'm going to abuse you and all of that. It doesn't fit. And so I so often have this conversation of, narcissists don't do this. And people will go, yes, but it happens. Like,
Oh, it
that's
happens.
not what I said. I didn't say it doesn't happen. I said
Yeah.
narcissists don't do it.
Well, and some people with NPD might do it,
Well, yeah.
but that it's not the diagnostic criteria, right?
No, it's not a thing that we do. It's just, yeah.
I think it's a problem that kind of now abuse, particularly psychological abuse, is now equated with NPD.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, people with NPD may be psychologically abusive. People without NPD may be psychologically abusive. But the conflation of these two things, I don't think is serving anybody.
No, not at all. But it does make it so more people can make TikTok videos about being a narcissistic abuse survivor. And I think that's where it all is perpetuating from. And that sort of thing. There's so much of it now.
See, my worry about those kind of 6 ways to get back at your narcissist video, I'm like, for some of these people, they're referring to a very dangerous person, who, to put no finer point upon it, may well kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that they may well be in dire danger from this person. I don't think encouraging people to think about how they can get revenge on or hurt that person is helping anybody.
Yeah, don't.
And it's certainly not moving on. It's certainly not moving on and getting on with your life.
No, it's poking the bear and hating the bear for being a bear is what it is as well. It's like you're a nuss. I must hurt you. Like, well, just leave them alone. You know, they are what they are, and that's nothing to do with you. Leave them alone. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We are by and large, you know, it's impossible to say we're all one thing or another, but some of us will kill you. And don't fuck
it's
with
not
those
an
people.
NPD thing. It's not an NPD thing. It's an abuse thing.
Mm.
Just to be really clear about that. It's that pattern of serious control and psychological torture that would scare me.
Yeah.
Not NPD on its own. If that makes sense.
It's just so far removed from any experience or thought I've ever had. Or that I've ever, you know, seen examples of in, God, people I've been in therapy with, people who are also diagnosed, and lengthy conversations with them about this. It's not, it just doesn't rear its head at any point through narcissism, or, you know, for me, anything else I've personally encountered, you know, but of course it's terrifying behavior, and we need to, I don't know what the solution is, other than sort of, it's better education, isn't it? And talking about it, but yeah, it's not doing anyone any good.
Well, on that note, if you like this video, hit the like button, leave a comment, let us know your experience of what you've called love bombing, what you think about the definition of love bombing in the context of coercive control, and what happens in relationships where there are issues of narcissism. And I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, take good care.